There's a story hiding in plain sight, one that's been told for over 5,000 years, but we've been reading it backwards the entire time. Everyone talks about the Sumerian tablets like they're a record of loss, powers stolen, humanity diminished, gods taking what wasn't theirs. But what if I told you that's not what happened at all? What if the real story is about a negotiation, a deal? And what if we're still living with the consequences of that ancient contract every single day? My name is Alex, and for the last 3 years, I've been tracking something that archaeologists don't want you to notice. It's not in the forbidden sections of museum archives, and it's not some conspiracy kept secret by ancient organizations. It's hiding in the actual text itself, in what the tablets say versus what scholars claim they mean. And the deeper I went, the more I realized we've fundamentally misunderstood the relationship between early humanity and the forces that shaped us. Here's what conventional archaeology teaches you. The Anunnaki came, they created humans as slaves, they gave certain powers to human kings, and then they took those powers back. That's the dominant narrative. It's clean, it's simple. It's also completely missing the context that changes everything. Because when you actually examine what those 7 powers were, and you look at what humanity had to give up to receive them, you realize something shocking. We didn't lose these powers because they were stolen. We traded them away, voluntarily, and we're still making that exact same trade right now, with different names and different faces. Let me break down what the Sumerian records actually describe. The 7 powers that humans supposedly possessed before the theft were the power of direct communication with the divine, the power of longevity and freedom from fear of death, the power of perfect memory and knowledge transfer, the power of collective decision-making without hierarchy, the power of abundance without scarcity, the power of movement and migration without restriction, and the power of self-governance without intermediaries. Now read that list again, slowly, and then ask yourself, is that describing supernatural abilities, or is it describing something else entirely? I think those weren't magical powers. They were social technologies, ways of organizing human life that worked without hierarchy, without priests, without record keepers, without systems of control. And the moment certain humans agreed to take on the role of intermediaries, priests who could talk to God so you didn't have to, scribes who could remember things so you didn't have to, rulers who could make decisions so you didn't have to, everything changed. Those powers didn't vanish. They were delegated, concentrated, put into the hands of a few, and in exchange we got something the old system couldn't give us: the ability to scale, to organize thousands, then millions, then billions of people under a single system. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because if my interpretation is right, then the Sumerian tablets aren't documenting a tragedy. They're documenting the birth of civilization as we know it, and that birth required sacrifice. Not the sacrifice of powers, but the sacrifice of autonomy. We traded direct connection to transcendence for the ability to build cities. We traded perfect memory for written language. We traded self-governance for organized society. We traded the freedom to fail for the security of structure. And in exchange, and this is crucial, we got the ability to do things that small, autonomous groups could never accomplish. We built irrigation systems. We created mathematics. We developed medicine. We enabled specialization. We made progress. But here's what the academics miss, and it's the whole reason I'm making this video. That trade, that fundamental negotiation between individual autonomy and collective power, was never meant to be permanent. It was meant to be a phase. A necessary phase, yes, but a phase nonetheless. Yet something happened. Somewhere along the way, the people who held those concentrated powers, the priests, the kings, the scribes, the intermediaries, realized something profound. If people remembered that they had once possessed these powers directly, if they understood that what felt natural and inevitable was actually a choice, they might ask for those powers back. So they didn't just take the powers, they made us forget we ever had them. They rewrote the story. The Sumerian tablets that survived, Those are actually the ones that were preserved because they served the power structure. The ones that contradicted the new narrative, lost, burned, reinterpreted. This is why we have so many versions of the flood myth, so many different accounts of creation, so many fragmented records. It wasn't random deterioration. It was curation, control of the narrative through control of the archive. Now, if you want to understand how this actually happened, the specific mechanisms, the timelines, the hidden texts that scholars have quietly acknowledged but refused to popularize, I've put together a deep dive resource in the description and in the pinned comment that goes into the archaeological evidence most documentaries won't touch. It's where this story really gets interesting. But let me bring this to the present day, because that's what makes this relevant to you. The same mechanism that worked in ancient Sumer is operating right now. Only the intermediaries have changed their uniforms. Where priests once mediated between humanity and the divine, now algorithms mediate between you and information. Where scribes once controlled knowledge, now tech companies control what you see. Where kings once made decisions for the collective, now corporations decide what products you need. Where the temple was the only place you could access spiritual power, now you need a device to access anything at all. We're not living in a different system. We're living in the exact same system, just with updated technology. The powers that humans supposedly lost, direct communication, perfect memory, knowledge transfer, collective decision-making, abundance, freedom of movement, self-governance. They're not gone. They're just locked away behind paywalls, terms of service, corporate platforms, and systems of authentication. And we've been convinced that this is inevitable, that this is progress, that the alternative is chaos. But here's what the tablets are actually trying to tell us. If you read them with this context, every system that concentrates power requires the forgetting of alternatives. The moment you remember that you once had direct access, that you once didn't need an intermediary, that you once could communicate without permission, that system becomes fragile. That's why there's so much effort put into making sure you never connect the dots. That's why history is taught in fragments. That's why the Sumerian tablets are presented as evidence of loss rather than evidence of choice. The seven powers weren't stolen, they were traded. And like any trade, the terms can be renegotiated, but only if we become conscious of what the original contract actually was. Only if we understand that what feels inevitable was once a choice, and only if we start asking a question that makes every system of power deeply uncomfortable: what would happen if we chose something different? The real power in the Sumerian story isn't in the narrative of loss, it's in the narrative of negotiation. Because if our ancestors negotiated, then so can we. That's the part they don't want you to know. If you want to explore this deeper, and I mean genuinely understand how ancient systems of control are being replicated in our modern world, there's a comprehensive breakdown in the description and the pinned comment that walks you through the evidence. Go check it out. It'll change how you see not just history, but your relationship with technology and institutions today. Because here's what I've learned through 3 years of researching this. The tablets aren't warnings about the past. They're instructions for the future. They're showing us the mechanics of how power consolidates, and more importantly, they're showing us that consolidation requires our participation. That requires our forgetting. And that ultimately can only work as long as we stay asleep to what we've already lost and what we still have the power to reclaim. Thank you so much for watching, and I genuinely hope this shifted how you think about one of humanity's oldest stories. If this resonated with you, please subscribe to Uncharted Minds, hit that like button, and turn on your notifications so you never miss a new upload. We've got way more stories like this coming, and you won't want to miss them. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.